The wind across the Texas plains didn't whisper. It moaned, a lonely sound that matched the feeling in Clara's chest. She had been walking for hours, her cracked boots scuffing against the hard earth, her small carpet bag feeling heavier with every step. She had no destination, only the desperate need to be anywhere other than where she had been. Up ahead, a flicker of light pierced the darkness. It was a campfire. She paused, her heart hammering against her ribs. Approaching a stranger in the night was dangerous, but the night was cold, and the alternative, walking until she collapsed, was more dangerous still. Caleb Turner sat with his back to a gnarled mesquite tree, a tin cup of coffee growing cold in his hand. His small herd of cattle was bedded down nearby, a dark mass against the star-dusted sky. He heard her before he saw her, the soft crunch of a footstep on dry grass. His hand moved to the rifle leaning against the tree. She materialized from the gloom, a slight figure silhouetted by the firelight. "Hello." Her voice was quiet, rough from disuse. Caleb didn't rise. "Evening." His tone was neutral, giving nothing away. She stepped closer, and the fire revealed her. A woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with dust in her hair and a weary set to her shoulders. Her dress was simple and travel-stained. "I saw your fire," she said, stating the obvious. "I was hoping perhaps I could just sit for a while, just to rest my feet." Caleb studied her. She wasn't a threat, too tired, too exposed. He saw the pale skin on her ring finger, where a tan line should have been. He saw the raw spot on her heel through a hole in her boot. "There's coffee in the pot," he said, gesturing with his chin. "Cups on the rock." The simple offer, unaccompanied by questions or suspicion, nearly undid her. Clara's eyes stung with sudden, unexpected tears. She blinked them back fiercely. "Thank you." She poured the coffee and sat on the opposite side of the fire, cradling the warm cup, the silent stretch between them, filled only by the wind and the occasional snort of a cow. It was a comfortable silence, or at least a non-threatening one. After a long while, Clara spoke, her gaze fixed on the flames. "I was a mail-order bride, or I was supposed to be." She let out a small, hollow laugh. He took one look at me at the stage stop and changed his mind. Said I looked too frail for farm life. She shook her head. He was a large man. Looked mean. I think I was lucky. Caleb said nothing, just added a piece of wood to the fire. The hotel in the last town wouldn't give me a room. A woman alone. Unseemly. She finally looked at him. So I just started walking. Caleb met her gaze. He saw not a frail woman, but a resilient one. He saw the grit it took to keep walking into the unknown. "Where were you heading?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Away." He nodded slowly, accepting that. He thought of his own solitary drives, the long nights, the constant work. He thought of the empty cabin waiting for him. He was a man given to impulse, but something about this woman stirred a feeling he thought long dead. Pity? No, it was recognition. He knew what it was like to have nowhere to go. "I'm heading south to my ranch," he said, his voice low. "It's a 3-day drive. I could use an extra pair of hands to help with the cattle. It ain't easy work, but I can offer you a meal and a place to sleep that ain't the ground." He paused. "And when we get there, you could decide your next step. No strings." Clara stared at him, searching his face for any sign of a trick, of the same cruelty she'd sensed in the man who'd rejected her. She saw only a quiet seriousness. He was offering her a chance, not as a woman, but as a hand. It was the most dignity anyone had shown her in weeks. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "I can work." The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of bacon. Caleb had coffee ready, and pointed to an old pair of leather gloves on a rock. "Your hands will thank you," was all he said. He showed her how to ride the flank, how to gently guide the strays without spooking the herd. She learned fast. She didn't complain when the sun burned or when her muscles screamed in protest. By noon on the second day, Caleb saw her wince as she pulled herself into the saddle. He rode over. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she said, her jaw tight. He didn't argue. He just reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small tin of liniment. "Rub some on tonight. It'll help." That evening, as she sat by the fire rubbing the liniment into her sore shoulder, she felt his gaze on her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for this, for not treating me like—" She trailed off. "Like you don't belong," he finished for her. He looked out at the dark shapes of the cattle. "I know what that feels like, to be on the outside." On the third day, a young heifer got her leg caught in a tangle of old barbed wire left in the grass. The animal bawled in pain and panic, thrashing and making it worse. Caleb jumped from his horse, but the heifer's sharp hooves kept him at bay. Clara didn't hesitate. She dismounted, grabbed a thick saddle blanket, and walked calmly toward the frantic animal, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "Easy, girl, easy." She threw the blanket over the heifer's head, blinding it. The animal immediately stilled, trembling. "Now," she said to Caleb. He moved in quickly, using wire cutters to free the leg. The cut was ugly, but not deep. He cleaned and wrapped it as best he could. When he was done, he looked up at Clara. She was still holding the blanket, her face calm. "Where did you learn that?" "Growing up on a farm," she said simply. "Pa always said a calm voice works better than a strong arm." Caleb just stared at her for a long moment. He saw her differently then, not as a lost soul he was helping, but as a partner, an equal. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed at his chest. That night, they sat closer to the fire. The silence between them was no longer just comfortable. It was full of unspoken things. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice rough. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said, the words seeming to cost him something. "Since then, it's just been me and the cattle and the quiet. I thought I liked the quiet." He paused, looking at her. "I was wrong." Clara's breath caught. She reached out and placed her hand on his where it rested on his knee. His hand was rough and calloused, but it turned over and held hers gently, as if she were something precious. They reached his ranch late on the third day. It was a small, weathered house with a barn that leaned slightly to one side, but it sat under a wide, beautiful sky, and it felt like a sanctuary. Caleb dismounted and helped Clara down from her horse. He didn't let go of her hand. "You asked to rest by my fire," he said quietly. "You can stay." Clara looked at the house, at the man beside her, at the vast, open land that no longer felt empty. It felt like a beginning. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like to stay." He lifted his free hand and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was tender, a stark contrast to his rough exterior. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, tentative kiss, full of promise and the fragile hope of two people who had found each other in the vast, cold dark. When they pulled apart, the first stars were beginning to appear. Hand in hand, they walked toward the small house, ready to face the future, not alone, but together.